everybody has some really beautiful stuff about them. So I think gratitude for those beautiful aspects sets us up for a foundation in a conversation where we're actually not BS, but actually loving thy neighbor as thyself.
Stay connected to gratitude. Hit the follow button right now and join thousands of listeners tuning in each week. We're the Gratitude Seekers. Come join us. Hi, Gratitude Seeker. Welcome to a new episode of the Gratitude Podcast. Our guest today is a renowned clinical psychologist and expert in sustainable well-being on a mission to foster sustainable well-being and planetary health. I think it's a really wonderful vision that we are a part of by having him on this podcast. I'm really excited. He published over 20 scientific articles on well-being, mental health, and sustainable living. And now he's here with us on the Gratitude Podcast. Dr. Donald McCoon, welcome to the Gratitude Podcast.
Thanks so much. It's nice to be here. Nice to talk to you today.
My pleasure. My pleasure. So let us know a little bit more about you. I wanted to keep this brief so that you can let us know more about you, about your story, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. That was a nice intro. You covered the science parts. I was in science for about 20 years, working on mindfulness and neuroscience with Dr. Richard Davidson, who is known for his work with monks and mindfulness. And then I sort of switched to doing a full-time private practice. So I see patients, every day. And so at this point, I've seen patients for about 20 years as well. I have about 16 years living in co-housing, which is community-based intentional living. So that might be interesting. It is interesting to me anyway. And let's see, what else? I guess, the other thing that's been unfortunately prominent in my life is a fair amount of suffering. So I had, let me see, I'll back up a little bit. I was born a rich white Anglo-Saxon Protestant in Los Angeles. And so I had a lot of privilege growing up. And I feel like one of the things that happened was my 3-year-old was diagnosed with leukemia. And we had around 3 years and 3 months of treatment there, which is pretty difficult treatment. He's fine now. He's 18 and doing well. And then, I think my family blew up during that time. And I think it blew up in part because we have some fragile systems in our culture. And when I say our culture, I am speaking about my particular culture, but I'm also speaking about, I think, our culture worldwide. Rianne Eisler would call it a dominator culture, perhaps. So we could talk more about that. But in any case, I feel like, and then my wife had around 6 or 7 years of chronic disabling pain. So all in all, about 13 to 15 years of pretty hard times, which I think taught me that the importance of being there for each other and how I don't think our culture trains us to do that. And when I say be there for each other, I mean be there for our own mental health, but also our relationships, and then, of course, ultimately the planet. We're not separate from the planet. We're part of nature. We're not apart from it. And I don't think I think we've forgotten that, truly, in a million different ways. So that's sort of the idea about sustainable well-being, or thriving on one planet's worth of resources. That's been, I think, our prime directive as human beings for a long, long time. And for about 18,000 years, we've sort of forgotten that purpose. And now we realize, after this long experiment that we had called civilization, a sort of a lifestyle based on, I think, exploitation, we now realize the results of that experiment are in, and they're pretty resounding results. And that is that we are not succeeding at thriving on one planet's worth of resources. And we do need to do that. So let's, we need to shift our culture. And that's a lot of what I care about. And I suppose, I have a 10-week training that does that, right? That tries to help bring people from 0 to 1 in terms of understanding all that. So, yeah.
Wow, there's a lot to go into. So, um, let's start with the co-housing. I've heard about this concept um, in a book about happiness, I think, um, uh, by a Danish author, and I know that it's a thing in Denmark.
Yeah.
So let us know a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, you're right, George. And it got sort of born, I suppose, that's this version of it in Scandinavia, and I think Denmark in particular. And really, it's a balance between public and private. It's a group of people who wants to live a little bit more cooperatively than your normal kind of neighborhood. At least I can speak most to the typical neighborhood in the United States is formed by basically income, right? People who can afford to be in that area gather in that area. And whether that's a good way of gathering people together or not is another really interesting question, I think. But in the case of co-housing, people are intending to live in a community that's perhaps a bit more cooperative. And typically there's a common house and where people might share meals together or might just gather and meet together. And then there's a kind of an intentionality around the physical structure of co-housing so that it encourages interaction. And as one example, so we basically have 2 courtyards and everybody's facing everybody else in the courtyard, and the parking lots and the cars are relegated to the outside. So unlike a typical city street where your front yard and your porch and everything socializing is right there on the street, we have basically a green, you could call it a commons. It is a commons in the middle of our houses, which has, I think, security implications. I mean, it's safer. People can see each other. But also, you see, Karen sitting over there doing her gardening, and someone else, a neighbor, trying to avoid names, I suppose. But anyway, building their little fort under the plum tree, and so there's all these interactions that happen because they're easy to have them happen. And the other thing I should mention is that, this phrase, people, you can't live with them, you can't live without them. People are a pain. But we are also a very gregarious species. We need to connect. So at the heart of this is this kind of difficulty and challenge about connecting with people and how to do that. And I think, I hope I'm not going on too long for you, Georgian, but the cooperative aspect of things is really limited, I think, by a culture that's fragile in being able to deal with unpleasant emotion. So if there's any disagreement, we tend to avoid it. And that's a very smart move in a culture that doesn't know how to deal with disagreement, because if you have a disagreement, it can really explode a whole relationship. But it's not very resilient. If we just have a disagreement and all of a sudden our whole relationship falls apart, that's not what we need to learn how to thrive on one planet's worth of resources. We need a little bit more resilience than that. So that's a lot of what I talk to people about.
Definitely. So I like to think about this in regards to gratitude as well. Like you mentioned that we can't live with them, or and we can't live without them. Um, People, especially the ones that we care about, are the ones that annoy us the most, but also that actually make us the most grateful. So I think that's a really interesting thing. And I love this concept because I mean co-housing, because it, in my view at least, it's something that's really natural to us as humans, in the sense that um, based on my knowledge, we have been in tribes much longer than we have been in cities, and we're much more used to actually being in such a community, and um, working together one way or another, rather than just being in a city with a lot of people. I'm sure many of our listeners can relate to this, and still feeling alone. I think this is a really interesting paradox about our society today. Like, there are so many of us, and yet we still feel alone. And I think these kinds of communities actually help with that. Is that true? Does that work with reality?
I think it does. I think in our old city block, which is roughly the same number of houses that we have around a courtyard, I would say we knew about 2 to 4 families. And in this community, we have 2 courtyards, and I would say we know well, but we know almost less. We know everybody by name, and then we know a few families better. Of course, there are some people who we get along with better than others, which is totally natural. I think it's an important point though too, which is that we're not looking to be best friends with everybody. We're looking to be kind and civil to each other, and then occasionally dealing with some disagreements as well, hopefully skillfully, early and often, which is a difficult thing to do. But yeah, I would say we know more people. And the other thing I think you bring up, which is really interesting, is we we tend to go through life, I think, in our culture with avoidance. And what that means is that we do have, in America anyway, a loneliness epidemic right now, just as you're, I think, alluding to. And I think the reason for that is very clear. It's because we've been taught to deal with all of reality through avoidance strategies primarily, which means when life is pleasant, we try to be light and easy, polite, nice, as opposed to kind. And that tends to be shallow relationships and shallow interactions. On the other hand, if things, you can understand why we would want to do that if the alternative, when things get unpleasant, is silence and violence, which really is the alternative when we use only avoidance strategies. But there's 2 other strategies, and one other kind of, I'm pointing at you like a grid, because there's this thriving strategies things that I talk to people about. And at the top of the y-axis is connecting with reality early, often, and skillfully. Connecting with each other, connecting with ourselves. So mindfulness is an example of connecting with ourselves. And if we can start to connect with other people in an emotional way, so Sue Johnson is a relatively famous psychologist and a fiery personality as well, cool personality. She talks about the 3 components necessary for a bond is being emotionally accessible, responsive, and engaged. And the key word I would say is emotionally. And so in an avoidance culture, we don't typically share much emotion. And part of the reason is we're afraid that some of it's going to be unpleasant, and then it's going to go to silence and violence. So we keep things light and easy. But the problem with light and easy, I think for most of us anyway, is that it's not satisfying. It's not nourishing. It's not real. We really want to be engaged with each other. And so in order to do that, we can really start to get good at dealing with unpleasant emotion in particular, so that instead of avoiding, we can actually be connected through that. Now, that's really, really hard, though. It's really hard to do that. So I don't blame people for trying to avoid it. I think, in fact, the thriving strategies, there's 4 of them. Avoidance are half the strategies, and they typically are good for the short run, but cause long-term pain. And so we want to be very careful when we use avoidance strategies and invite ourselves and each other, I think, to use connection strategies. To actually know each other, like even in this interview, Georgia, like, who are you, right? You're a human being. Who am I? I'm a human being. How can we just have a conversation across this vast internet space that we're on, and share who we are with each other? That's not that easy to do in many ways. And a very beautiful opportunity that we have every day with lots of people.
That's so true. Yeah. And I wanted to get into this because, like I said, the usually most of the times when we think about gratitude, we think about the people in our lives. We think about the experiences that we have or we have had with them, and yeah, without actually being available, without actually creating these bonds, we wouldn't have had these kinds of beautiful experiences that would make us grateful. So I think it's a really interesting topic to go into, so that we can create more experiences in which we can be experience more gratitude. So you mentioned dealing with these unpleasant emotions. How can we deal with them instead of avoiding them?
Well, there's a lot of kind of mind traps or language traps that we have that have trained us up to deal with unpleasant emotion in ways that aren't very helpful. So, for example, a big one is criticism, self-criticism in particular. I think many of us are trained up to self-criticize. This is sometimes under the guise of taking personal responsibility. Criticism, I'll lay this on you, see what you think, Georgian, is, sorry. So I'll lay this on you. So the hypothesis here that I want to share with you is that criticism is always inaccurate and counterproductive.
Wow.
Always. And a lot of the reasons why it's inaccurate is that it's too general. If I say, for example, I'm stupid, God, Donal, you're such a stupid idiot. This sort of internalized self-criticism that some of us can have. Well, it's not true that I'm stupid. It's not true that I'm an idiot. It may be true that I suck at math or I can't find my way around town. And that actually is true, that last part. I have weaknesses. Of course I do. Everybody has weaknesses. But it is not true that when I condemn my character, that's what a criticism is. When I notice problems in behavior, that's a complaint. So a complaint versus a criticism. So I'm sort of unraveling this language trap or this habit for you. It's just one example. So a criticism is always inaccurate and counterproductive, and it's about our character. A complaint is about behavior, and it's often very helpful. And yet we have another language trap: stop whining, pity party, Debbie Downer. And by the way, there's often misogyny involved here. Why is it Debbie Downer instead of Davy Downer, right? It's often that we're knocking women. Why are we knocking women? I would propose to you that one of the reasons we knock women is because they're in charge, historically, this shouldn't be the case, of our emotional lives. So what men have typically done is relegated emotion to women and then criticized women for expressing and being intelligent about emotion. That, of course, is a cultural feature that must stop. But in any case, so we've got these language traps that keep us trapped in these ways of being that make it really difficult to deal with unpleasant emotions. So, for example, if you say to me, Donal, I really don't like that you said that to me. And I say to myself, God, Donal, you're a stupid idiot. How could you say that to Georgian? That's really lame. Right? Well, what I'm focusing on right now is how I'm a bad person rather than the three things we need to focus on. And there's only three things we need to focus on when we make a mistake. And they are GRL: grace, repair, and learn. So grace is meant to point to compassion, self-compassion, and other compassion. We make mistakes. It's okay. Repair, I would apologize to you if I could. And there's not always a repair that can happen. So we just repair if we can. And then third thing is learn from it. Why did I say that to Georgian? Like, why did that come out of my mouth? I'm not proud of it. It's not who I want to be. And I take a moment of mindfulness, right? I take a moment of trying to be aware of my body, emotions, and thoughts, which is a pretty decent definition of wisdom, I think. And use that data to really take stock of what happened. So I can learn from it and not do it again. So that right there is just one example of a kind of series of little language traps that hang together so that if you say something that bothers you, and I'm self-critical and defensive, which criticism and defensiveness are 2 out of 4 of the 4 horsemen of a relationship apocalypse, which is John and Julie Gottman's research out of University of Washington. So very important to avoid those 4 horsemen in any relationship. And I can avoid it simply by eradicating criticism from my life, not noticing mistakes. No, let's notice mistakes all day, every day. I don't want to keep repeating mistakes. I don't. So I notice these mistakes, and all of a sudden now I'm much more likely to be able to hear you, because instead of focusing on how my whole soul is corrupt and I'm full of shame and I'm worthless as a human being, I'm just saying, oh, shoot, I made a mistake and I'm trying to repair. And ideally, I'm trying to listen more to what the mistake was and how it made you feel and what's going on with you. Now that can then become what I would call skillful disagreement. This is unpleasant emotion. It's difficult, but we're actually engaged together and connecting. Really, really hard to do unless you've had a ton of training to do it. And most of us have been trained in avoidance, not connection. Most of us. So there's a few people I think who have been trained from, just by luck, by having the right parents or whatever to connect. I was not raised that way. So I had to discover some of these things the hard way. And I'm hopefully just shortcutting this for other people. That would be a really cool goal, wouldn't it? That'd be neat.
Definitely, definitely. Well, I believe as well that most of us weren't taught, and I think most importantly, they didn't see this kind of behavior. It's not something that we um, saw other people do around us, so that we can learn from it and mimic it and do something very similar in relationships. And of course, almost always avoidance was the easiest way to go about it. So yeah, what I'm really curious about, on a quite different note, is if you have like a more scientific definition of gratitude.
Well, I don't have a scientific definition. I don't know the science of gratitude too well. I'm sorry to say. I think of gratitude, so it's an experience of, I think, connection and appreciation for something that's happened, or something, a quality that other people have. It's, I guess, sort of at the end of the day, an appreciation. And I guess then I would sort of put that under the category of love. M. Scott Peck's definition of love, Bell Hooks picked up on it in her definition of All About Love, in her book, All About Love. And his definition, and the one she picked up, is extending oneself for your own or someone else's spiritual growth. And I would add to that, while accepting who they are. I think that's probably an important component also. So gratitude, I think, in a way, is appreciating everybody has strengths, everybody has gifts, truly. And one of my challenges, just to be straight up with you, Georgian, would be to talk to, let's say, a Trump supporter, okay? This would be a challenge for me in my politics. Like, I just don't. But my task, and I think our task as human beings, is to love that person also. That is, to extend myself for my own and their spiritual growth while accepting who they are. Everybody has some really beautiful stuff about them. So I think gratitude for those beautiful aspects sets us up for a foundation in a conversation where we're actually, not BS, but actually loving thy neighbor as thyself. That is a very difficult thing to do. and it's very easy to give lip service to it. I think we all do it all the time, I mean, and it's fine. It's like we're not perfect, right? So we do the best we can. But I think getting to the point where I can be truly um, connected to someone and who has those beliefs. And part of the secret, I think, is to not narrowly define someone as just those set of beliefs. Uh, I have some neighbors who have different political views than I do, and I'm friends with their little daughter who was building the forts that I referred to, and has little what do they call it? Little quail that she has named, and we pet the quail, and so she's really provided a bridge for that family, and they're delightful people, straight up. I mean, they're just good people. We have different political beliefs. Uh, I don't know that we're probably ever going to focus on those political beliefs, so there is some avoidance there, which is I think probably very helpful in some ways. But I would like to think that if we build up those pleasant to unpleasant interactions, and some people would say, the Gottmans would say 5-to-1, we need 5 pleasant to 5-to-1 unpleasant interaction, or 20-to-1 pleasant interactions to 1 unpleasant interaction. I mean, that's tough. Except if you can include things like, hey, how's the weather? It's great. How are you? Yeah, I'm fine. How are you? Those are, I don't know whether to count that as 1 interaction or 2 in that case, but it's real important that we have a foundation of that, so that when we disagree, we know each other as human beings. So I don't know, that was a little bit of a long answer for you, a little bit riffing off of the kind of the scientific definition. I think some of your guests are probably much better equipped to do that, but I would include it as a form of love. And then that love is pretty foundational for not only my own mental health and not only my relationship to you, but our relationship in politics and our relationship to the planet. Just as I might be tempted to separate from myself from this other species of person who voted for Trump, which is a mistake, I also we separate, otherize all the time, and we do that with the planet. We do that with other species. We do that with trees. We don't even know how vital the health of the soil is. I'm not a farmer. I live in a city. What do I care about the soil? Well, it's the basis of all life. It is so important that we treat the soil with the respect and love, you could say, it deserves, which means that we're nurturing the life in the soil. So this is not separate, right? This gratitude, this love is at every level, within myself, with each other, and then with the planet itself. And none of it's separate. It's all interconnected and interdependent, and we know this. But how do we continue to lean in to living that way? And your podcast is part of that, right? It's highlighting these themes that are so important to highlight for all of us. It's a global community, right? I think. How cool is that? It's
Yeah,
amazing. Yeah.
it sure is. It sure is. And I definitely resonate a lot with that vision and with uh, how impactful actually each interaction that we have is to the bigger picture and how connected we actually are. And I love what you said about gratitude and love. I think they are the, in my view at least, the most important virtues that we need to focus on as humans. Um, and I was thinking about the fact that we when we see people and getting back to the co-housing and with feeling lonely and interacting and um, feeling that people are closer to us when we, as you mentioned, when we think about the things that we appreciate, when it comes to our neighbors, to the people around us, we tend to connect with them easier. And in many situations, at least in my experience, it's been like this. I've created relationships, lots of relationships based on my appreciation for other people.
Mm.
and just letting them know that you appreciate something about them, and um, making that a bridge for communication and for connecting and for further gratitude, for further experiences that bring gratitude. So yeah, I love this idea that you mentioned, and I think it's very powerful, and I've seen it in my experience as well.
Yeah, I think it's easy to get caught up in um, not appreciating. And so it's a good reminder. It's a good reminder for me, how do we get comfortable appreciating ourselves and each other and articulating that? Um, and also, how do we balance that with being comfortable in dealing with unpleasant stuff as well? Stuff that's, if someone's going through a hard time, I think their experience in our culture, well, I'll give you an example if it's okay. Um, I remember a time when my son was, deep in hard treatment, and I was working out at this place, and so I'd see this kind of trainer there, you know, I don't know, 3 times a week, and she would ask me how I am, and I'd say fine. How are you? Fine. That kind of answer. And this particular day, I decided I'm going to try something different. I'm going to tell her actually how I'm doing. So uh, maybe the wrong move, but maybe I should have chosen to appreciate something about her. That probably would have gone better, to be honest. But what I decided instead was I would tell her how I'm really doing. And so she said, "How are you, Donal?" I said, "Things are really rough right now." And she said, "Oh, I know, the snow has been just terrible." And so right there is a really good example of how there was a moment where she could have said, "What's going on?" But she, in my view, sort of ran away. She ran away to the kind of light and easy scripted answer. And what that told me was, oh, I get it. You're not going to go there. So you're not someone with whom I can share what's actually happening. And it makes the world a little bit colder and a little bit lonelier. So I think you're so right. We need to appreciate people. And I also think we need to be resilient to being able to be present to them so that when things aren't okay, we can hear that too. And that balance is really the whole enchilada, I think. It's the way we could deal with reality early, often, and skillfully with kindness. Um, yeah, it's very exciting stuff, and it's not that hard. Well, it's not that hard to start on the journey. Let's put it that way.
That's true. That's true. I love the fact that you stopped yourself. It's actually not that easy, because I believe also it's a habit that we have, that we've developed, and it's a mechanism that's working on some level, even if it's not perfect. It's helpful in many ways on the short term, at least. But yeah, definitely something that we can all work on and improve in many ways. So I also wanted to get your perspective on how um, we can all create a healthier planet, an ecosystem that is more um, in the direction that we actually want it to be. So how do what does what we can do relate to that?
Well, there's really good news in that regard. We have never been more powerful than we are right now. We've never had more knowledge. We have much more variety in our gardens than now than we did in the Middle Ages. We have all the physical technology we need to solve these really difficult problems, ranging from climate change, desertification, soil erosion, the reemergence of infectious disease, climate change. So I would point people to two major areas of knowledge. One is permaculture. So it comes from putting permanent and agriculture together as permaculture. And then people like Jeff Lawton, who I'd recommend highly, is an Australian, and David Holmgren, They are people who teach permaculture and live this. David Holmgren has a book out called Retro Suburbia, which is excellent. Jeff Lawton does a terrific permaculture design course. Anyway, the point is that these systems are known. We know how to do it. Holistic management, by the way, would be the other one that I would point to, which is Paul Savory's sort of holistic design approach. But what one major feature of it is mob grazing, sort of imitating the Serengeti in terms of many animals going through a small area very rapidly. So they don't destroy it, but they poop, they fertilize it, they eat, they convert. It just creates an amazing ecosystem and a really wonderful short film. I think it's 3 minutes, maybe it's 8 minutes. I can't remember. Is a National Geographic, I believe it is, film on the wolves, introducing the wolves back into Yellowstone. And but the point I would make is we have all this physical technology. We could reshape the landscape so it was relatively permanent and sustainable in not very much time. The hard part, and everybody will say this, Jeff Lawton will say this, everybody will say this, the hard part is the people, which brings us right back to cooperation and right back to the stuff that you talk about. And I would say there's two changes, and they're very fundamental, sort of abstract ways of talking that we need to do in order to avail ourselves of this physical technology that really can save the planet. The two changes we need are dealing with reality early, often, and skillfully with kindness, which I've said several times. And the second thing, which is critical, is distributing power equitably. And that's within ourselves. So we don't have little parts of ourselves that we think are ugly and worthless, and we shove them off to the side where they then create all kinds of problems mental health wise and in our relationships. So we don't do that. We distribute power equally or equitably within ourselves. And then we do it within each other. We don't have violent conversations where I'm trying to dominate you or you're trying to dominate me or I'm trying to prove some point. We're having a discussion, right? Discussion means mutual influence, which, by the way, is another Gottman kind of nugget about relationships, is mutual influence. And then, of course, distributing power with the planet. I mean, the other species matter. We co-evolved. We're not separate from those other species. The trees actually not only sequester carbon and not only live because the soil is healthy, which also further sequesters huge amounts of carbon, or can, if we're not killing the soil, which is what we're doing in modern agriculture on a regular basis. Although there are some farmers who really are getting this, and it's really very exciting. When we honor all of that life, when we are interconnected with it, and we are able to become resilient rather than fragile in the way we deal with ourselves and each other, I think our politics is going to change. I think we can start to get on the same page with some of these solutions. But that is the challenge, is the social technology that we need to make all these things happen. And we cannot keep falling in the trap of otherizing each other, based on some political agenda. All that some politician has to do is wind us up and point us in the direction with a hatchet, and we're willing to go hate on people. We can hate certain behaviors, but not people. Let's hate certain behaviors and love people. But again, as you're saying, and as I'm saying, that is not easy to do. That is a spiritual practice. That is really hard. And by the way, when I talk about spiritual, what I'm talking about is wholeness. I'm talking about integrity. I'm talking about being whole, with maybe a little bit of life spark, So the body, the emotions, and the thoughts together with a little bit of life spark, which we could call soul. And you've got, at least in my way of thinking, what spiritual is trying to point to. So yeah, that's I don't know if that's a short or a long answer, but that's an answer to your question. It's a great question.
Definitely, definitely. I love how you went through a lot of the things that are going on in the world, but also inside of our own world. And um, yeah, it's a beautiful um, way of seeing this, and how it actually how it is impacting one another in a really interesting way. And I think that's something that's very empowering from my point of view, knowing that we can do things and we already are in a really um, great situation. Even though there are challenges, we also have many solutions. And I believe that thing that uh, inside of our heads, let's say, as well, like even if we have so many challenges in many situations, we also have the solutions and the necessary tools to overcome them. So yeah, I think this is a really good thought to end this interview with, and yeah, for our listeners to ponder on, because yeah, we do have a lot of opportunities now that people in the past did not, and it's up to us to make sure that we use these tools and we choose better from some points of view. So thank you so much for being here with us, for sharing your wisdom, for sharing your beautiful mantra. I'm sure that um, most of our listeners already think about it, and hopefully they will. I at least I know for sure that I will think about it and see how I can integrate it somehow in my own life, because it does make a lot of sense. And yeah, if we deal with things uh, before they become big, and we deal with them with kindness, we will enjoy better relationships and a lot more gratitude. So yeah, if you have any closing thoughts as well, I would appreciate that.
Well, I don't know if we'll include this or not, but I did want to offer people, if you thought it was appropriate, a kind of a 10% off the training that I do for them. But again, I don't want to convert this into an ad, so I just don't know what's appropriate or not. Can you just,
Yeah,
what are your
definitely, go
thoughts on
ahead.
that? Oh, well, so I don't know exactly how to work that either, but I think I've heard in the past you've done, it'd be oneplanetThriving.com/gratitude or something like that. So I can set that up so people can go there, put their name in, they'll get a free training if they'd like it, and they can also get 10% off as a way of encouraging all of us to get the skills we need to make this happen. So anyway, I would just offer that, and if that's appropriate. And thank you so much for your thoughtful questions and your, as far as I know, off the top of your head, co-housing knowledge. That was pretty impressive. I think, it seems like you're a good Renaissance person, and I think we need Renaissance people who have knowledge across a wide variety of areas now. Um, Rather than necessarily getting into our expert silos.
Hey, Gratitude Seeker, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this interview. I really appreciate it. And if you could think of one person that would also benefit from it, share it with them. It might actually be the inspiration that they need to make their day or maybe even their life much better. Thank you so much once again. This has been Georgian Benta. Don't forget to keep seeking and spreading gratitude.